I love great conversations. Hi, my name is Angel Jones. Thank you for joining me on 12-Minute Convos, where I help you create a brand of your own unique, real self. Listen in as I have conversations with amazing people from all over the world. Good morning, Toni Husbands. How are you going on this wonderful, beautiful morning?
Well, it's a little rainy here in Chicago, but otherwise, I'm doing well.
It's a great pleasure to connect with you, Toni. Please tell us which of your talents is responsible for us connecting.
Well, I reached out to you, I guess, to kind of share my story about paying off $107,000 of debt. Thought that might be something that we could have a 12-minute conversation about.
Yeah, well, hey, we could have an entire lifetime of conversations on that topic, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing. I do appreciate you reaching out. Fascinating stuff. Ooh, wow, I got to listen to the podcast. Well, you've just journeyed into the podcast realm, you said, right? You were doing this for like 4 years now, which is the show. Tell us more about it, please.
Well, I had the podcast in some respect. I didn't know it was called a podcast back when we first started. We were just looking for a way to have money conversations. And so the podcast is in some respect been around since 2010.
Wow.
And it's the Midday Money Show. Well, we started with three co-hosts, basically. And we're just women who had our various experiences with money, and we were trying to figure it out and hoping that our conversation and our discussions about the experiences of paying off debt, for example, or reaching financial freedom would be something that other women would latch onto. And it's kind of taken on a life of its own. So as I mentioned, my site is, I didn't mention, I'm sorry, but my site is debtfreedivas.org. And the reason we started this all those years ago was basically just to have a community where people felt comfortable talking about money. You know, money is still this very taboo topic, and we are more comfortable, at least in this country, we're more comfortable talking about sex and politics and religion than we are talking about money. And I know that all too well as somebody who struggled my own self silently for a number of years, because it's an area, I think, with your money, it's kind of like a check on how you're doing just in life. And if you're struggling with finances, then sometimes we take as a knock on how we're doing as an adult, as a person. And it needs to not be that way, because again, doing well with money and learning how to manage your money, those are all learned skills. And if you weren't fortunate enough to pick those up in any significant way, either from parents, or you happen to study this topic if you were going through school, or you happen to be somebody who ran into a personal finance, guru that connected with you. A lot of times we don't have that, especially in the Black community.
So who did you learn it from?
Well, it was a really, I wouldn't say that I had parents who were horrible with money, but I think we just have some long-held beliefs that aren't helpful. For instance, that living with debt is normal. And as long as you make your payments and as long as you have good credit, then you're in a good situation. Because my husband and I, for the longest time, we thought we were doing well. We had great credit scores. We were, able to pay our bills on time. We had a really decent income, but we had a lot of debt, and it really came to the head, if you will, when we decided that we were going to start a business. And so I quit my job. So there goes our income by 30% overnight. And we have to figure out, okay, how, we have to really start paying attention. We had to really start paying attention to where we were spending money, because we didn't have all of this excess just to cover impulse shopping or mistakes or whatever we decided to finance at that time. And to answer your question about where I came into this from, I started to read, I started to search for myself, because I was just like, okay, I was thinking about it, we make way too much money to essentially live from paycheck to paycheck. And that's what we were doing. We weren't able to save anything. We weren't able to, if there was any kind of a snafu, we were kind of scrambling, and how are we going to move some things around, or what are we going to take from here or borrow from Peter to pay Paul? And I just felt like we were too well educated. We were decent people. We paid our taxes. We were like, productive contributing citizens to this country, but we were just not able to really get ahead. And I looked around and I'm like, wow, we make all this money and we don't really have anything to show for it other than a bunch of bills. So I started living in the library. I will tell you that, because again, like I said, we had at this point start really pinching pennies and watching our expenses. So it wasn't like I could just had a lot of extra money to just go, maybe pay for seminars or go take a class. So I ended up living, I shouldn't say ended up, but I was living a few blocks from like the most fabulous library in Chicago, right? We were downtown at the time. So I honestly would just go there and like peruse the personal finance shelves. And I'd like dust it off my library card. Who does that anymore? And obviously these days you can rent books, ebooks. You don't even go to the library anymore. But also going there, I would find out about, seminars or workshops or talks that people were having. So anything that had to do with personal finance, I was drinking it in. I was just trying to learn, like, how do you, pay off your mortgage early? Why should you carry a 15-year note versus a 30? These are just concepts that were foreign to me at, a 30-something-year-old person, basically. And, why it's not a good idea to carry balances on your credit card from month to month, how compound interest is working against you. These are things. I studied engineering in school. Finance was never, other than, again, paying your bills on time, it was never really a concept that I paid much attention to. Even investing, like, how do you make your money grow? Working to be financially free so that you don't have to like work up until retirement and then maybe make it just above the poverty line, which again was very common and is still very common, especially in the Black community.
What was your husband's response?
Hey, you know what? We were very different in terms of the approach to debt. Like, debt for some people, and I'm one of those types of people, debt represents insecurity for me. And it's a source of stress. And here's the thing, when we actually added up how much debt we had, then it really became stressful to me, because I've read stories that say, like, if you carry even a $3,000 worth of debt on your credit card, that's kind of the tipping point where it starts to become a source of stress for you. So when we first sat down and kind of figured out everything that we owed, at that point, we had about $45,000 of debt. And that was on everything from like student loans to a timeshare we'd bought, cars, the normal stuff, credit cards, et cetera, right? And so we had about $45,000 of debt. And at this point, I also mentioned that I'd quit my job so that we could go into business. So we opened a laundromat. So then that added additional, because we were financing this stuff. We didn't have cash. We had good credit, but we didn't have cash. So we were financing all this stuff, and then finance all the things that go along with trying to run a business that really didn't work, that we ended up having to close. So my husband and I at the beginning had very different approaches to what debt represented. He thought, again, he was one of the types of persons that thought, as long as I could make my payments on time, as long as my credit is good, then I'm doing okay. But the thing you have to think about, and we were, again, in our early 30s at that time, that you have no control over a lot of things that might happen. The market, the economy, your job, all of these things are not guaranteed. What you do have control over is the choices that you make with the money that you have. And so thank God we have never been in a situation where we have missed payments, but we have been in situations where both of us have been unemployed at the same time. Wow. And I think those experiences, we're talking over 10 years now where, we've had to kind of face some challenges. But I think over those experiences, we've kind of come to the point of view that it's probably a better bet for us to live without consumer debt, because you just don't know. Live without consumer debt. Make sure that you have emergency savings in place. You just don't know, even though we're in a good place now where we're able to cover expenses and save and invest. We could know my husband could fall ill. We're a one income family still. He could fall ill, and then there's a whole situation that you have to deal with. So the one thing we can control, and I think we've come to this point because of experiences, and not just because of me wagging my finger in his face like, you need to listen to me, but we have both allowed each other to arrive at the point where paying for things in cash, especially items that don't that depreciate in value. So cars and vacations and anything else. So paying for things in cash is a better way to live versus, using your credit cards or financing or going into debt to support a lifestyle that your income doesn't.
All right. Well, amazing audience, we are live with Toni Husbands. Again, she is the host of the Midday Money Show. You can definitely check out that podcast. Toni, let's switch gears for a moment now and let me invite you into my time machine that is surrounded with beautiful, warm, blue Caribbean water. Toni, what is your earliest childhood memory?
I think my earliest childhood memory is probably, it's funny, I wonder if I remember this or if it's been told to me, but I would say living in England. My father's in the military, so we spent a good deal of time in other countries. And the first memory that I have is probably, I was telling my husband this actually recently, living in a trailer park.
Wow.
In England. And I can't even tell you. I know it's about an hour outside of London, so it was at Air Force Base. Woodbridge was the Air Force Base, but I do remember kind of, existing in this trailer park, which at the time I thought was this huge space. It was my mom and dad, my brother and I used to just think this was so much space, but I think about it now, it's probably a little bitty something.
How old do you think you were?
How old? I was probably 5 or 5 years old. Yeah.
Why do you think this memory is so clear?
That's a good question. I don't know why it's so clear. Probably because it's my first one. And I think one of the things that moving around a lot, I do have a lot of gaps in my memory because we don't have kind of like that kind of, clear, continuous existence in one place. And so there are a lot of gaps in terms of things that I know that I remember for myself versus things that my parents. But this is one of those things that I remember being here in this trailer park. This is where I learned how to cook eggs on the stove. Like random things, right?
Well, can I offer an interpretation to the thought picture you created in my mind?
Okay, go ahead.
I love the idea that your views and how they can change when you grow or when you change the way you look at it. So it's intriguing to see your expansion in your thoughts when you changed your view on debt. And to see it as a child where something that seemed as though it was enough, only when you learned more, you realized as much as the value of the family aspect is what is the great content there, the space is not one that you have to be or exist in. You can achieve more.
I see that. I really love that connection. That's such a good connection.
You're welcome. You're welcome. If we fast forward to when you were 12 years old, what was your favorite song?
Ooh, 12 had to be something by New Edition. So that was 12 years old actually was my first concert. So the first concert, I think I was actually back stateside recently.
Tell me one song.
What song? It would probably had to be like Candy Girl. I mean, I loved anything by New Edition, but I'll just, if I have to pick one, Candy Girl. Yeah. And I remember going to their concert and they, we were like way up front, but it was just like, oh my God, I probably, I relate to all of the little girls that like, whoever the One Direction or whoever the new thing is now. But that was my very first concert that I got to go to live. And it was, and I am still to this day, I'm 43 years old. I am still a New Edition fan.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely a New Edition person as well, right? Getting out of that, all right?
True. Another connection. I like that.
All right. Well, Toni, we've arrived at our destination, but before we get off of this time machine, there's a small declaration form, so it's yes or no. We're going to move pretty quickly here. Are you ready, Toni?
I'm ready.
Toni, have you chosen someone to pass on your skills to?
Oh, yes.
Are you married?
Yes.
Do you have children?
Yes.
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
Do you have an inner circle of friends?
Yes.
Do you watch TV for more than 3 hours a day?
Oh, unfortunately, yes. Sometimes.
Right. What about screen time? The phone and the computer, is it more than 8 or less than 8 hours a day?
I would probably say more.
All right. If you had to share with us, Toni, a statement that represents who you are, your own unique real statement, what would you say that is?
I would say that I am unashamed about the mistakes that I've made in my past because I use the lessons learned to do better in the future.
And to help others as well, right?
Yes, indeed.
Love it. Toni Husbands, this was a great pleasure. Before you leave, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience? I
want to go back to that safe space with the blue Caribbean waters for a second. But if I could share anything with your audience, I would say that if you are facing what you feel like is a mountain, a massive problem, reach out for help. There is a solution. You might not feel like there is one initially, or maybe you can't see it because you are facing the mountain, but find somebody that's either been there, that you trust, that's responsible, that can help you, or that is professional and that deals in that particular situation, because there is a solution to your problem, but suffering in silence is not one of them.
Love it. Hey, Toni, again, great pleasure. Thank you for being on What is Inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones. Stay tuned for more from our advertisers.
Diabetes is a mountain pandemic. It's a disease that's not acute but chronic. Similar to this rhyming method, I have simplified the definition, the signs and symptoms, and the complications of diabetes for both adults and children in my books, Poems for Patients, A Focus on Diabetes, and The ABCs of Diabetes for Children. These books are available on Amazon.com, and for more information, you can visit my website, poemsbyaj.com. That's poemsbyaj.com.